Hi, choices, choices, choices. From the minute that you wake up every single day, it's choices that you make. And those choices will lead you somewhere by the end of the day or by the end of several days, months, and years. And it's those little choices which are everything. So says EksAyn Anderson. That's our guest today. This is Now Tell Us, and I'm your host, Anthony Moirore. Welcome to the show, and I believe it's going to be a great one here. So, we ask for your participation, please. If you have a question, please send it. If you want to make a comment, we would love to see your feedback about this show. Remember to subscribe to our channel or to follow us from whatever it is that you're watching, because we are live on many different platforms, and also on the podcast platforms you will get this show and older shows. And the easiest way to get them is to go to www.nowtellus.com. And now, I don't want to take much more time because we've got much to hear from EksAyn, because he's going to tell us. So join me as we go together to meet our guest today. Here we go. Hello, EksAyn.
Hi, Anthony. How are you?
I'm fine. How about you?
Doing great. Thanks for having me on the show today. Appreciate it.
Wonderful, wonderful. And we are excited to have you on our show today.
Thank you.
Because we know that you have a lot to tell us.
Well, I may.
Yes, you do. Because first and foremost, I want you to tell us I haven't seen that name in my lifetime. EksAyn, please. And the way it's written is a special way. So you're going to explain to us. Tell us what it is.
Well, my name is EksAyn Anderson, and I've got to tell you, I heard once that it was Swedish. Here's the problem. I've been to Sweden, and there's not a single person in Sweden named EksAyn. Anybody who's listening in Sweden can back me up on that. Nobody in Sweden is named EksAyn. My wife calls me X.
No.
Please. I got to tell you, I don't know if that's a good thing if your wife calls you X, but that's what my wife calls me. So anyway, glad to be on the show. I have a unique name. It's a very unique name. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, and it's always good to have a unique name because as I know, once you go onto the internet or everywhere in the world, if you have a unique name, everybody is going to remember you. So at the end of this show, everybody is going to be remembering X.
You go, and you can call me X. You can call me EksAyn, whatever works better for you.
Okay, here we go. So where are you?
I'm located at the base of the Rocky Mountains in Alpine, Utah right now.
That's beautiful. And how is the weather today?
Well, it's a little cold. It's kind of a cold January day, but it's beautiful, and there's snow on the ground, and enjoy being here.
Okay. What time of the day is it, and what have you done so far for the day? I wonder.
Well, that's great. So I got up early with my children and my wife. So we like to study together, and we like to exercise together and get ready for the day. And so that's what we did prior to the show here, is exercised and studied a little bit together, and now the kids are at school. So
that's good. That's good. And tell us a bit about you. Who is EksAyn?
Well, that's a great question. I'll tell you a little bit about me. Something that happened a long time ago that I think maybe might be important to know. When I was young, I used to like to draw trees. and I draw them with all the branches, all the leaves, every single little vein in the leaves. And I went to school later and I saw how the other children drew trees, and they just drew them kind of like with little two lines and a poofy cloud on top. Well, my mom, when she saw that I changed from drawing them kind of with all the detail and every branch and twig to just drawing it with two lines with a little poofy cloud on top, she cried, and you can imagine why.
Mm-hmm.
Well, fast forward a little bit. I was a few years later, I was at a little league game playing baseball, and I'm not here to tell you how pathetic I was at baseball, but I had one bunt the entire season. I wasn't very good, but something really significant happened after this game. After this game, we came home from the game and my mom complained of a very severe headache. She said it was worse than childbirth, which I haven't experienced.
Mm-hmm.
Some of you may have, but my dad became concerned and he said, we're going to take mom to the hospital. And I remember giving my mom a hug, and then they left and drove away. Well, I went to my uncle. I was a little bit concerned because I hadn't seen my mom go to the hospital. She wasn't the kind of person who got headaches. That wasn't typical for her. And I said, "Is my mom going to die?" And he said, "No, your mom's not going to die. She probably just has a migraine." And I said, "Do you promise she's not going to die?" And he said, "I promise. Just relax. She's going to be fine." And I wanted to believe him. Well, I went downstairs. I climbed up on my bunk bed. I opened this book, started reading it. It was a book about squirrels. I still remember the book. And I waited for my parents to get home, and they didn't get home. Well, the next morning, I was a little bit anxious. I wanted to see my mom. I wanted to see my dad. I climbed off my bunk bed. I went to the door, and I opened the door to this to try to see if I could find my parents. And on the other side of this door was kind of a long family room. And on the other side, I could see my dad, but something was different. My mom was not there. Instead, there was a friend and a neighbor and another friend and another neighbor and another neighbor. It seemed like half the neighborhood was in our home. And as I walked closer, I could see that my dad had been crying. He had tears on his cheeks. And as I got even closer, my dad was crying, and he's trying not to cry, but he kind of gathered the children together and he said words that I'll never forget. He said, "I think our mom is going to leave us." And I put two and two together. What had happened is my mom had suffered a cerebral hemorrhage, which means a blood vessel in her brain had burst, and she was now brain dead, at the hospital, being kept alive by a life support system. Well, a couple of days later, we were there in the hospital. I could see my mom on this hospital bed. She had tubes coming out of her nose. She couldn't breathe on her own. She had to use the help from a machine of a respirator. And so her chest would kind of go and then fall down. And I was really scared. I mean, as an 8-year-old boy, I was really, really frightened by this. There was nothing the doctors could do. They unplugged my mom. And when they did, I was so scared. I kind of crinkled up and turned bluish. She crinkled up and turned bluish, excuse me. And I wanted to give her a kiss, but I was afraid to because she didn't look like my mom. And so I went and just kind of faked a kiss and kissed the air and then walked out. Well, my mom died that day. And as an 8-year-old boy, I watched her die. Here's my question for you. How do you think I draw trees now? Well, I draw them the way my mom would want me to, the way I see them, right? And even though I haven't given her a hug in over 36 years, there's something that's almost as good as giving your mom a hug, and it's feeling her influence. I got to tell you that one of the things that's one of the defining moments that shaped my life is that parents, little things that my mom did still profoundly affect me today. And little choices that we make still profoundly affect. And we can talk about that later. But you asked about one of the things that was kind of a defining moment in my life where I realized that you know, I guess I'm on a mission now to help people realize that their choices, especially as being a parent, but in business as well and anywhere, little choices make a huge difference. And I can tell you more about that. So,
Okay, we'll get to hear more about that. And sorry for that loss. As Mishka says, we see that it still affects you to this day in a big way.
yes.
Yes, and we pray for strength as you keep on moving, as you keep on even being a great dad to your children. And
Well, I'm
as
not always, but I try to be. Right.
yeah, and so you help people make those important choices, those little choices. Um, Maybe you can tell people what are the titles, even if I don't tell them the titles that you are. What are you exactly that you help the people with the choices?
Well, let me tell you this. You're saying the titles? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Well, out of all the titles that people can have, they can have business titles, and so those are important. But I think one of the best titles is one that you just mentioned. I'm a father,
Mm-hmm.
and that's more important to me than any of my other titles. I'm a husband and a father, and yeah, I've done some other things. I am an author and a speaker, and I've started some businesses. But the most important thing to me is that I'm a dad and father, and I value that title more than others. Just so you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's important. I can tell you, if you want to talk, let me share a little bit more about the little things. I have this friend named Daniel, and
Okay.
Daniel was some time ago, he was accepted to an Ivy League school, Stanford. And when he went to Stanford, going to Stanford is kind of a big deal. And I did a little research a while ago, and I found that the average person in Stanford makes, and I think it's more now, but in year 5 when they graduate, they make about $285,000 a year in the 5th year that they graduate. Well, the average person in the United States, the average household probably makes closer to $55,000 a year. I think it's a little higher now, but when I checked it a while ago, that's a difference of $230,000 a year. And if you do that for 30 years, let's say you work for 30 more years, that ends up being just under $7 million, $6.9 million difference because you went to Stanford. Well, even that number is low because it didn't take any into account inflation. It could actually be more like 20 or $30 million more. And I went to Daniel and I said, so here's, Daniel's probably has a good chance of making at least $6.9 million more than perhaps the average worker in the United States. And I went to Daniel and I said, hey, Daniel, what did you do to get accepted to Stanford? And his answer really surprised me. This is the answer he said. He said, my dad taught me that if I didn't understand something, that I needed to look it up. And I'm sitting here thinking to myself, wait, $6.9 million, look stuff up in the dictionary. Look stuff up. And he goes, tell me more. And he said, well, this is what would happen. He said, I would be reading a book for school and I wouldn't understand one of the words. And my dad had just taught me, don't be content with not knowing something, go and look it up. So I would go look up stuff in the dictionary, and I'd have to go look up the word in the dictionary. And I said, okay. And he goes, and I'm still thinking to myself, wait, you're going to make millions and millions, $6.9 million at least, probably more like 10 or 20 million if we take into account inflation and all the other numbers, but at least $6.9 million. And you're telling me that you got into Stanford because you'd look stuff up in the dictionary? Like, tell me more. And he said, well, this is what would happen. I'd go look the word up in the dictionary, and then I'd understand it for the school assignment, because it was kind of interesting because I'd hear that same word again on the radio or on TV or on, in conversation somewhere. And because I'd taken just a little time to look it up in the dictionary, I now understood more about what they were talking about on the radio or on the TV or in the conversation. And he said it became kind of exponential because I'd hear it and I'd understand it. Well, and I thought to myself, well, that makes more sense. But I'm still thinking to myself, $6.9 million, look stuff up in the dictionary. I said, Daniel, was there anything else you did to get accepted to Stanford? And he looked at me kind of funny and he goes, well, sometimes I had to look stuff up in in the encyclopedia, right? So here's the interesting thing. In Daniel's mind, the reason he got accepted to Stanford, which is a great school and will give him lots of opportunities, is because he would take a little bit of time to just look stuff up in the dictionary. Now, I went back to Daniel years later. I kind of had this thought in my mind. I was thinking about this for a long time. I went back to Daniel years later and I said, hey, Daniel, how much time a day did you spend looking stuff up in the dictionary? He said it wasn't very long. He said maybe it was 5 or 10 minutes, maybe 15. I said, well, what was it on a really bad day? And he said, maybe 30. So here's what I did. I went home and I did some math because this kind of sat with me. I took 30 minutes for every single day that he was in kindergarten, first grade, second grade, third grade, fourth grade, all the way through middle school or junior high, all the way through high school or college. I took all of the hours from the time he was very young until he went to Stanford, and I divided it into $6.9 million. Do you have any idea how much money he was making looking stuff up at the dictionary is when he was just a child? I mean, like in just elementary school, you know? And the answer, I did the math, and I believe he was making like $2,200 an hour. Now, remember, that number's low because he was probably making more with inflation.
Mm-hmm.
Can you believe that a kid, by looking stuff up in the dictionary, would, for his future earnings, be making $2,200 an hour? Well, I think with Daniel, he did. And so when I tell this story, you know, some people think, well, if I'm going to go to a great university, or I'm going to start a big business, or I'm going to have a great relationship, I have to have this magical big something happen to me. And I don't think that's true. I think it's the little things. For Daniel, it was just the little choice of, I'm going to look it up in the dictionary. And that was worth probably millions and millions of dollars. He's still in his career. I don't know what will happen, but the chances are is that he'll do very, very well. And it was because of those little choices that he made that made it seem like a big deal. And so when you and I are talking, you know, if sometimes a little tiny choice that may not seem like it has anything to do with where you're going can make all the difference. Like, you know, what time am I getting up in the morning? Well, maybe I need to get up an hour earlier. Just getting up a little bit earlier and committing to myself that I'll do something can make a huge difference. You know, maybe something as small as just exercising gives you the energy to do the other things you need to do. These little looking stuff up in the dictionary was a big deal for Daniel, and it has and is making a huge difference in his life, just taking the extra time to look something up in the dictionary. On those same lines, you know, we talked about my mom, just knowing that my mom wanted me to draw trees the way I see them. Well, I got to tell you this right now, figuratively, right now, me sharing that story with you, I'm figuratively drawing trees the way I see them right now in this moment. And even though I'm not actually drawing trees, I mean, I'm sharing my heart with you. And that's, there are things that my mom said, there's things that my mom did that even though she died 36 years ago, they still, or more than 36 years ago now, it still profoundly affects me today. And I just want people to know that if you want to, you know, whatever it is that you're trying to do, pay attention to your little decisions. Maybe you think it's not a big deal to surf on your phone because you like to read the news. Well, what if you gave that up and you did something more productive? By the way, I've struggled with this myself, right? Well, you add up 30 minutes a day and you do that for your whole life. It ends up being, it could be a year or two of your whole life that you're spending reading the news. Well, what could you do with that 30 minutes? You know, little things like that. So these are great questions, Anthony. I appreciate you letting me share.
Yeah, and it's good that you're sharing this with us. And I'm thinking, now this is something, and it's good that you admit that you struggle with the phone, and many of us struggle with a lot of things. And some of the information that we keep on getting are things we know, like look it up in the dictionary. We know that, but do we practice it? That's the question.
That's right.
So because I know it's something that you're working on a daily basis, can you give us maybe some tips on how to work at it, how to make it happen?
That's a great question. Yeah, great question. So there's a man named Stephen Covey, and he wrote a book called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and it sold millions of copies throughout the world. Maybe you've heard of him. He wrote this book, and I read it many years ago, and there was one part of this book that has profoundly impacted me. One of the things he said in this book, he said he was at a conference once. Somebody came up to him after the conference and said something that kind of surprised him. He came up to him and said, "I don't love my wife anymore." And you can imagine he was kind of surprised. He looked at the gentleman and he said, "Well, then love her." And the guy goes, "I don't think you heard me. I've fallen out of love with my wife. My wife has fallen out of love with me. We have 3 kids. We're probably going to get a divorce, and it really concerns me." And Stephen Covey looked at him and said, "If you're not feeling it, that would be a good reason to love her." And the guy goes, he said, "Well, how do you love someone you don't love?" And Stephen Covey said this. He said, "My friend, you're acting like love is a feeling. Love is not a feeling. Love is a verb. It's an action word. It's something you do." But he said, here's the key. If you do the verb, if you do the action, the feeling will follow. This is a principle in life that's really huge. In other words, some people think that your feelings are just out there and they control you. That's not the truth. We can actually lead our feelings with our actions. So the answer for this gentleman, if you're not feeling love for your wife, go do the dishes, go give her a foot rub, go take the children so she can have a break. Do something that shows that you love her, and your ability to feel love for her will follow. Now, this same principle, let me tell you one more story. I have a friend whose name is Brody. He lived in a neighborhood that I lived in several years ago. And he was doing this one particular workout. He said, "I was working out. I think it's called the Spartacus workout or something." He said he was doing this workout. He said he got to the end of this workout and he was so sore he could barely walk. And he did it again, and he was so sore he could, he couldn't walk. And he did it again, and he did it again, and he did it again. He said, "I hated it. I hated this workout." But he goes, "But I kept doing it every day because I'd committed to do it." And he said it was really interesting. For about 2 weeks, it was just a nightmare. He said I didn't like it. But he goes, right around week 2.5 or 3, because I don't remember the exact day, but I got to the end of this workout, and instead of feeling so sore that I could barely walk, he goes, it was interesting. For the first time, I felt like I was just getting started. He said, I felt like I wanted to do the workout again. And so I did. He goes, that day I did it twice and I felt like it. He said it happened again the next day. I got to the end of the workout and I didn't feel like I was done. So I did it twice that day too. I liked it. You see, he aligned with this principle that says we can lead our feelings. Now, can you imagine someone saying, well, I'm just going to sit on the couch until the feeling to work out just kind of wafts by. I'm not going to work out until I just feel like it. Well, you'll never get off the couch. You got to get off the couch before you feel like it. And if you do it long enough, you'll feel like it. So I think we all know the things that will help us. We know, if I do these little things, the problem is we don't do them because we don't feel like it. Mm-hmm. Well, the key is, if you're at a point where you can't do things, like make a little commitment to yourself and keep it, just a small one, and then increase it a little bit more. So you can say, I'm going to get up at this time for the next 3 days. See, it's hard for you to get out of bed. Just keeping that commitment builds your trust in yourself more. And then you can say, well, now I'm going to do it for the next 5 days. And then I'm going to do it for the next 7 days. And as you do that, you say, well, I'm going to exercise even though I don't feel like it for the next 3 days. Just start building it. And what happens is you start to trust yourself. You start to say, when I make a commitment, I can trust that I'm going to follow through. And that power, that sense of like, I can do it, is powerful. And as you increase, just start small if you need to, increase, and then do those little things that you know you need to do. Most people already know what they need to do. Mm-hmm. They just don't do it because they don't feel like it. Well, we've got to do it before we feel like it, and start small until you can get to the point where you say, well, you know what? I can trust myself. Now, here's the thing. Don't make a commitment to yourself you're not going to keep.
Mm-hmm.
Can't keep it, don't make it, because your personal integrity is too important. Consider carefully what you're going to do. Now, you still do need to make commitments to yourself, but start with one, like think about it hard. Which one am I going to do? And then keep it. No matter what, make your commitment and then do it. Now, even if you don't feel like it and the alarm clock rings, you said, I'm going to get up at 6 a.m., but I'm feeling really nice and warm and I don't want to get up. Do it anyway. And then build that way. And that pattern of keeping commitments to yourself gives you strength. So then you can eventually start doing really big things because you can trust yourself, and people can trust you because you can trust you. And those little things will start adding up. Really will. It's more powerful than people realize.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I'm a believer, and I draw that from Luke 16:10, which says that whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much. So,
that's so nice.
Yeah, so if you can be trusted with very little, then you will go on to achieve greater things ahead of you. So just do it. And
Yes.
thank you for sharing that. Now, we thank each and every of our viewers who's there, you, our audience. We appreciate you. We appreciate your feedback, and everything is beneficial to this show. Now, Mishka has something. She says something. I was just saying to myself this morning, I don't like certain things that have happened to me, but living life on life's terms affects us all. God bless EksAyn. Now,
how kind of
comment
Mishka.
on that.
Thank you. It was very kind of you, Mishka.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, comment on that. She doesn't like some things that has happened to her, but then she accepts the life terms.
Well, here's one of the things that we can remember. If you can just accept that life is difficult, it actually becomes less difficult once you truly accept that it's difficult. And let me tell you why. If I go through life thinking I should have a great life and this is the way it should be, and then sometimes your reality doesn't mesh up. So you're expecting something here, but you're getting a lower result. Well, what's the distance between expectations and reality that's lower? I call it frustration. The space in the middle is called frustration, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so if I expect really big things and then my reality is lower, I'm frustrated. Now, here's the other thing. If I expect that life is hard, but then I work hard and it gets better, now this is delight. This changes from frustration to delight. When you flip the lines, where actually, so the minute you say, you know what, I'm just going to expect that life is going to be tough. And truthfully, it is. I mean, the truth is, life brings challenges to everyone. Everyone who's listening to this show has pain, has something hard for them that only they know, that I don't know, that you don't know. And that pain inside, everybody has it. Now, by the way, on a quick side note here, that's one of the reasons why it's so important to treat people kindly. It's so important to see the positive in people. People are really, really looking to see that positive. So on just a real quick, let me just take a side thing here. They say, if you want to influence anybody, the best way to do it is to see the good in them, to catch them doing something right. And it's not to point out what they're doing wrong. It's to catch them doing something right. I have a wonderful daughter. One time when she was very young, she got up and knocked on my bedroom door and she said, "Hey, Dad, I made my bed, I made my lunch, and got ready for school. I'm ready to go to school. Surprise." And I had just learned this concept that the best way to influence people is to catch them doing something right. So I went to my wife and I said, hey, let's give this a lot of attention, because that will hopefully reinforce this. And so we did. We went out there and I said, hey, look, your bed looks great, and you made your lunch, and you did all these things. And it was really interesting because she did it again. She did it again the next day, where she got attention for it. It's almost like behaviors are like little seeds in the ground, and attention's like water. We water the behaviors we want to see grow with attention. Well, if you're trying to, that's a little thing you can do, that if you're trying to influence anyone, keep your eyes out for doing something right. Now, what would have been less effective would be to wait till my daughter sleeps in, doesn't make her bed, doesn't clean her room. And then I could storm in there and say, no, why didn't you make your bed? And how many times do I have to tell you to get up? And that would be less effective than me just saying, hey, this. Now I've blown it a lot of times where I haven't done it the right way, but that's one little thing that we can do. But I'll tell you this: if you can be a light to people, if you can find people and shine, catch them doing something right, you'll ease their burden. Your ability to influence them will go way up as well.
Oh, thank you. So catch someone doing right. Don't look for that wrong that the people are doing. Look for that right thing that people are doing.
You'll influence them more if you do. It's that even the research shows it's called positive reinforcement is way more effective than punishment. It's way more effective than negative reinforcement. Catching people doing something right is one of the best. It's a little thing, but it has a big difference. It's a little choice.
Wow. Thank you very much, EksAyn. We really appreciate you for being with us on this episode. We are almost coming to the end of it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anthony. What an honor to be on your show. So grateful to be on your show today.
Yes, and thank you also to our audience. Thank you for participating, for the questions, for the comments that you made. We appreciate. Remember to share this episode with all your friends, because it's a great episode. We've got so much insights from EksAyn. Now, there are people who would like to connect with you, and I don't know in what way you serve the people that are listening. You can tell them in what way that you do, and then we are going to tell them how they are going to connect with you.
Sure. I have a website. It's EksAyn.com. Now, here's how you spell it. It's EksAyn.com. And you're welcome to connect with me there.
Okay. So, EksAyn, you've heard from him. Go find out more from him, because there is much that he's not saying, because I know where he's coming from. It's don't lift yourself up so that you can be brought down, but go try and find out more from him. Go to his website, rush there. Once again, it's www.EksAyn.com. Go and connect with him. And yes, this is thank you. We thank Mishka. Thank you for Mishka says, I'm sharing. What a great episode. Thank you. Yes, and everybody else out there, share it, and also go to the website that we just talked about. Yeah, EksAyn.com. That's about it. And we've now come to the end of today's show. We have discussed about little choices that are everything, and sure they are. And our guest has been EksAyn Anderson. Now we are going, but before we go, we'd like EksAyn to leave us with a few words that we should always remember. Which are they?
I'll tell you a few words. My mom used to say this, and I think she got it from her mom. She said, no matter the question, love is the answer. Now, it may sound a little simplistic, but I believe it's true. Any of the problems that we have, if we can choose to love people, and we remember, how do you love people you don't love? You just choose to. No matter the question, love is the answer. And that's something that a little phrase my mom said that's lasted with me for decades after she passed away. Anthony, you're doing such a great job. Keep doing this. You have a great show here. Thank you for having me on, and may God bless you.
Yeah, God bless you too, EksAyn. I really appreciate that feedback. Thank you. I'm humbled by your comments because I know you're doing great things. So to hear a comment, positive comment, you're practicing what you preach. Find someone doing something good.
Well, I mean it. I mean it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you too. We really appreciate your time here. And thank you for everything that you've shared. So that's it. That's it for today. And this has been Now Tell Us. I've been your host, Anthony Morode. And our guest today is EksAyn Anderson. And we are saying bye for now.
Bye for now. Thank you, Anthony.
Bye. God bless.
God bless.